break of dawn to late night and get the truth straight from ADSN.
James, welcome back. We're here with ADSN. You're back with me. I missed you in person.
I'm very happy to be back at the ADSN National Studios. It is it's a privilege to be here, and excited for what we have in store today, my friend.
We've got some hot topics we're going to talk about. We've got a great guest commentator coming on later. But I missed you, so I was looking through LinkedIn, I was looking through X, and came across a LinkedIn post that I think we should start with today. That our very own you, James Barrow, were mentioned in. This post by Dr. Mark Grether talking about the future of advertising is changing. Whether Google keeps cookies or not, and he goes on to say that these changes really lead us to one thing that won't change, that people need to pay for what they buy. And you've said for a long time now, payments are the new cookies. And Dr. Mark Grether, who's the SVP and General Manager of PayPal Ads, seems to agree with you.
Yes, I was flattered that he tagged me in that. I felt like it's like it's the closest I could do to a Eric Sufordism in terms of a saying about payments are the new cookies, and I obviously totally agree with this post. And I think whatever happens to cookies, like I think transactional data and like platforms like PayPal, like what they can build, and like Shopify. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm like a huge fan of what Shopify could do. I think it could just be a monster, and I think it sort of is interesting because on one hand, you have like PayPal ads, and like that one's so like on the nose, like it just like makes so much sense. But then the other thing that I was thinking about is actually Suford posted a thing, kind of broke the news that Apple search ads were becoming Apple ads. And that got me thinking just a lot about like how interesting Apple's ad platform could be when you tie it to Apple Pay, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can close the loop in like a really kind of somewhat like distributed way because they're so hardware agnostic on the payment side. Yeah. And so it just like makes you, it's like ad tech's going to change so much again. And like, again, like, but I do think it's like the platforms that buy into the thesis, the payments are the new cookies, I think are going to absolutely crush it. And those that have the payments data, like they almost all for now are data rich, supply poor. And so it's kind of obvious that all these players are going to be moving into a place where they can go ahead and get their hands on supply. So I think it's like, but the fact that Mark is talking about this like publicly, I think like the race is on.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that a lot of the payments companies started on like the measurement side. If they ever touched ads, they were like a measurement solution to like close the loop for other platforms or other vendors. And I think over the last few years they've realized, wait a minute, we're already doing the hard work for all these other platforms. Let's go either acquire supply, let's go build a stack, let's go partner for supply. But we actually have the unique piece of information that ties us all together and makes this valuable. So I totally agree.
Yeah, and what's interesting, all of these, most of these payments platforms have like incredible merchant relationships, right? So they're going to be able to turn the merchant into an advertiser way easier than like a social network that doesn't have a sort of natural place for a merchant, which is actually a really good segue for the story I wanted to bring today, which was one of our buddies, Fintan Gillespie at Snap, who's the director of U.S. Revenue Partnerships. He posted this thing that Snap's doing now. And I like love this. And I think I sent Evan Spiegel emails complaining that they should do this like 100 times. So I'm happy they're actually doing it. I don't think that's why they're doing it, by the way, but I think this is a great idea.
Give yourself some more credit.
Yeah.
We'll attribute this to you on
no one
ADSN,
tagged
this
it.
is attributed to you.
No one tagged me in this post, at least. Dr. Mark at least tagged me. But Snap is doing this thing, the Snapchat affiliate program. And they're basically just saying, listen, like we are supply rich, but we are basically advertiser poor, right? Like we do not have a great way to turn a merchant into an advertiser, because there's really no like natural home for a business on Snap. Like Snap Maps is not the thing. And so they're basically saying, we got to have an affiliate program here. And so it's really well done. People should check it out. Like just Google Snapchat affiliate program. We'll put it in the show notes. But they're paying up to 20% of revenue for new customers that you help them acquire. And so like, this is anyone who is basically, advertiser poor and supply rich should do this. Like no brainer. I think you'll see more and more people do it. But it's cool, but it's a recognition though that like they don't have the hand that like a PayPal has or like an Apple has or a Google has, and so they have to play that hand differently. So like, I think I'm like proud of them. Like as demeaning as that sounds, I'm like really proud of our friends at Snap for doing this.
What I love about it, I mean, it leans into the things that are a strength for Snap. It's all O&O inventory. So it's like high margin that they can give 20% away and it won't make a difference. They run an auction, right? That like to them, if they can get more density into that auction, it's a net positive. Even if there's a rev share off of it, the base is now increasing. And like you said, like they're supply rich, demand poor. And so what better way to get people like espousing the benefits of Snap and pushing people in than like pay them?
Yeah,
Like,
no,
this
it's
seems like a no-brainer, and yeah, it's actually amazing that it's taken this long, and that more platforms, more tier 2, tier 3 platforms aren't doing something like this.
yeah. I like again, we've talked about this, before we were a standalone network as ADSN, as our previous podcast that we don't name anymore. But we've talked about how like these platforms that have all this O&O, they kind of have to start thinking of themselves like they're like Evan Spiegel is Jerome Powell, and like this is his economy, and like he needs to basically stimulate demand. And so like there are a few ways that you can stimulate demand organically, and then there's ways that you basically go ahead and you indirectly kind of pay for it. So these are like stimulus checks to try to get people to go ahead and increase their spend. And I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's going to work. It doesn't mean that you rather like this is not enough to overcome the lack of payments data that they have or the lack of merchant relationships that they have. But this definitely is going to make a positive shift. And again, like that's not to say Snap doesn't have other benefits. Like to your point, tons of O&O, growing fast in terms of user base globally. So like they have a good hand, but on the advertiser side, it's tough. And I think this is going to be super helpful. So good job, guys.
Yeah.
We're obviously still
Shout,
biased, but like
shout out
good job.
Fenton and the team over there.
Yep. Ali Rana leads that team. Good job, Ali Rana. Ali, if you're listening.
The ADSN clap.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I always love your, when you liken these platforms to like the Fed and like to hear, yeah, who's the Jerome Powell when you're making these, these metaphors. But I think, looking at the markets, I want to bring one up about this company Icon, which, ad tech, martech has, been on and off the past couple of years. But this one to me is like, ad tech investing is back. Martech investing is back. This is a company that went viral. If our viewers haven't seen it, you should go check it out. This guy Kenan Davison is the CEO of Icon. They raised a bunch of money from Peter Thiel and Founders Fund. And he kind of went also viral because he bought the domain icon.com for $12 million. So a lot to unpack here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a few things. I've bought a bunch of domain names in the past. That seems crazy he did that, but good for him, and definitely got everyone's attention. But I think the business is interesting. I agree. Like my initial reaction was like, when Founders Fund is investing in ad tech, like it's like we've come full circle. Like the fact that this is like what we do is like cool again is like amazing. And it was like very much, it's like you hang around the net long enough, you get a rebound. Like I feel like that's like that's like where we are in the cycle for at least just like ad tech being investable. I do think it is totally investable, by the way, for I think a variety of reasons that we probably talked about in the past. But I think you know, this concept that you're going to have basically like an autonomous like CMO marketing team just constantly running, pumping all this stuff out. I totally buy it. I think, we have, Waymark CEO coming on as a guest commentator later on today. He'll talk about like kind of all the different models, because these guys they are basically wrappers on top of a bunch of different AI models. And I think there's a ton of value that can be created.
Mhm.
Yeah, just a question like, does the value accrue to these new platforms that are being created, or they're going to be like modern day new publishers? And I thought this tweet
Mhm.
that Isaac put up basically was like, I don't think anyone realizes the LLMs are going to be ad platforms within 24 months, was really, really interesting. And he's referencing basically like the native Shopify checkout integration that got leaked, where like you would just talk to ChatGPT and you say, I want to buy something, and then you'll be able to do it. Well, ChatGPT will be able to do it for you. Just go ahead and buy this stuff for you inside the chat, which is like a super logical workflow. And so, I am curious to see like, is it going to be the icons of the world, that are just driving the cost of creative iteration down to zero? Or is it going to be the old world where basically the walled gardens accrued most of the value? Because when it comes to ad tech, really like the only two independent ad tech companies that have gotten to like escape velocity in terms of just like valuation are AppLovin and Trade Desk, and they explicitly don't buy ads across the wall gardens, right? So like Icon is sort of like, it's similar to our
Mhm.
old business like back in the day with Shift in a lot of ways, just like using AI. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like really interesting. I mean, I think we're seeing this like proliferation of these like wrappers on top of the LLMs. So like an icon, and maybe they're doing something very special, but like an icon, I think we're talking to Alex, CEO of Waymark, that's doing something different. We've talked to other companies specifically on the creative side of things, and right now it seems like a race to the bottom on price, and that the value is accruing to the underlying LLMs, and they get to train on all this data. And one day, if there's enough value in that market, they can turn it on. And if ChatGPT is doing partnerships with Shopify, which we know they're doing, if they start to turn these into ad platforms, I think that value starts to just you know come to them. And
Yeah.
as long as there's like enough of a TAM, so to speak, like I don't know why they wouldn't.
Yeah. I think the wild card is going to be, does like vibe coding make it where, and just like the cost of intelligence going to zero, just via these LMs and open source ones, are we going to have just a ton of new app experiences and like new touch points that developers make? And that can basically make it where at least your time is now bifurcated outside of the core LLMs. A good
Yeah,
example is like Perplexity, right? Like they definitely are taking both mind share and time, right? And they're even talking about buying Chrome. So like,
yeah,
I think it happened, but I wonder if it's going to be like, I'm more kind of bullish on like underlying ad tech for like these new AI native publishers than I am about a layer on top of the existing sort of ad platforms, like for the existing marketers, which like Icon is basically that.
yeah.
So I think like, but whatever, it's cool. Ad tech's back. The video that they made was awesome. The website's great. It is a great domain, and they deserve a lot of credit for trying. But let's go. Let's talk to someone who actually knows how this world's going to unfold, and get Alex from Waymark after the break.
We've been talking a lot about generative AI, vibe marketing, and actually using a lot of creative AI and ADSN's own social team. So we wanted to bring on a guest commentator who's actually in the space operating. Alex, welcome to ADSN. Let's get into it. Like, what is going on in the generative AI space today? Like, what's noise and what's real?
Totally. Thanks for having me. It's a thrill to be here with you. There is a lot going on. It is, yeah, like you say, there both is a ton of real activity. There's also a ton of noise. I think the kind of fundamental thing that's been going on with Gen AI for the last 2 years is there are these foundational models, and then there are starting to be some applied companies that are more solving specific problems. And so that starts all the way back. I mean, you could trace back however long you want, but most famously to ChatGPT in the language side. And you kind of see for the first time, everybody gets this new technology that is able to create stuff. It's creative. It can make things that feel creative. At that time, it's text. And I think a lot of people have had this experience at that time where it's like, okay, this is very cool, but what exactly do I do with it from a business use case? And then gradually people started to build products on top of that that could really solve problems. We're seeing that exact same thing happen right now in more of the visual space. And so, we deal at Waymark and with video, and particularly kind of high quality video that's in premium inventory. And so how do you actually make that? This year, we've seen so much progress on the video models. So things that actually generate video from text, video from images. Those are getting to a point where I would say they are almost usable for the average person. That's
And what are like the core models that like you guys are seeing adoption of? Like, is it like Sora? Like what is it that people are leaning on?
Yeah, there's almost 10 that are kind of in the race right now. Sora obviously gets a good name from OpenAI. I actually found that the best ones are the ones that coming out of China. Kling is the strongest text to video and image to video in terms of quality of the content and following your instructions. Veo 2 that Google just brought is also really strong. I'd say it may be the strongest in terms of understanding the physical world. Like, you're not really going to see things that just don't make sense, where, like people's hair is going through their arms and stuff that just is totally nonsensical. So that's a huge step forward. And then within that, there's a kind of an interesting decision that different foundational models have had to make, which is, do I go kind of down the fairway and give you something simple that is basically what you're looking for, or do I get a little more cinematic? And to your question about Sora went a little bit more the cinematic way, where it's like, you give it an image of somebody just smiling and you say, make them smile at the camera. Some models are just going to kind of have a natural, like almost like, Harry Potter moving frame, smiling and moving around a little bit. Sora, you might be like, and like, there's a whole film mood going on in the it's like, oh, that's cool. It may not be exactly what I want, but you can see some really you see professionals doing really cool stuff with that because it is a little more active.
And do these models, do we see like with text or image, like how they're kind of all contracting? Converging. Thank you. Are these video models, do you think, going to converge, or we start to see these differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that overall, we're going to see mostly convergence from the big ones, because I think there are kind of core things that people want to see. And then you'll see some smaller, more purpose-built models that might take more specific angles on what they do. And so they can, really thrive for a particular type of use case. I think what we're seeing right now, and a lot of you see these amazing examples that people post, like, on X or on LinkedIn or whatever, that are made by people who spend a lot of time and really understand it and are kind of film people, because they can work with that more. A, they put the time in to generate 50 times and get a good one, but B, they know how to prompt with some, the right kinds of language that's going to get you a nice filmic output. I think what we're going to see, and what we've seen with the LLMs, is the gradual decline of the need for prompt engineering, where you just kind of get what you would expect when you ask for something in natural language.
And when you're like dealing with these different models, I guess using like Kling versus Sora, like, can you tell? It's like you're talking to two different people. It's like you're talking to like Scorsese versus Tarantino versus is that like, can you tell the personality of these things?
Yeah, that's I would say the main, it's a great way to put it. I think overall, yes, you totally can. And if you kind of get to know them, they do have their own kind of tendencies. You can also prompt against that, though. I think like a classic, and maybe more of like the image to image generation, I was starting to see in video generations, like, do it in the style of X, of Scorsese or famous artist X. And so you can still do that, but kind of like the default mode, if you don't say in any particular style, they do have their own kind of natural tendencies.
And are there any other markets that you've seen that are competitive, like other than China, in terms of having foundational models? Like, is it really just US versus China so far?
Yeah, so far it really is. There's like 5 or so in the US, there's a couple out of China, and those are the ones in the video space. What we've seen with the text, the language text generation space is it's actually gotten surprisingly easy to make models. Not that it's still investment heavy. So, but I think we'll start to see probably a proliferation, but video is so cutting edge that it's still just the big one so far.
And are there use cases? And obviously, we have a bend towards ads and Martech, but are we starting to see use cases outside of that, or is it really like the heavy early adopters are like these marketing use cases, and then like hobbyists?
Yeah, I think it really so far is just those two. And really what you get is B-roll. So you got to be able to do something with it. And so that's
Mm.
kind of the state of the video generators, at least, is you get something that like honestly is in the spirit of stock. I'd say for our own purposes, where we're an applied AI company that's pulling together a bunch of different models and kind of the different state of the art for different purposes. We're most interested in image to video because people want their own assets. They don't want something that's just kind of generated out of nothing. And so far, like text to video is not really ahead of stock for anything that's just like kind of a down the fairway purpose. Anything you might expect in a stock library, like there's not a ton of reason to do a video generation. If you want something crazy that has never been filmed before, of course you can video gen that, but that's where you're starting to get like into heady creative director mode versus like
Yeah.
I just need an ad mode.
But we're not
Yeah.
watching like a 20, there's not going to be like a breakout Netflix show that like was like prompt engineered, in the next 2 years or something.
2 years, you may be like not just like straight out. You're not going to have one prompt like here's a film. And I'd say right now you can do some pretty cool stuff. Our creative team did produce a film that was awesome. Using some of these tools, but it took a ton of effort. It's like way less effort than it would have taken to go shoot on site this like mountain climbing scene, but it's still like a professional team producing and putting a ton of work into it. So that's kind of still where we're at.
Interesting. And I mean, we were talking about buy marketing a few weeks ago, and the first thing that comes to my mind is like, James, we've looked at some X posts of like people generating 20, 30 still image ads straight from like ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
they're good, right? Like you
Totally.
really good. And so you think we're on this kind of path to like, let me generate 30 still images, let me pass it to then image to video generation. And now I've got 30 stills, 30 videos, and then maybe, I don't know, one longer form video using all of those assets. Like, are we kind of moving towards that?
Yeah, I completely think that we are heading towards that. I'd say the hard part and a lot of, the cool things that you see people post, there is often a layer of it where it's like, ooh, this isn't necessarily exactly what I wanted. If I'm in a world where I'm just going to like post a ton of stuff, that could work, but there is still a bit of a challenge in getting it to be on brand, on message. We've done some experiments where you try to like, here's a video, can you make me some still versions of it? And it can really, really struggle with that. It also can't really do aspect ratios in a wide range yet. That'll come very shortly here. But, there's some like little bits that are still making the things that people post a little bit of a step away, I think, from the lived reality of people who are trying to run stuff with this. But we're very close. And I think directionally, 100%, that's where we're headed.
And if you were going to predict, I guess like it's obviously hard to predict this stuff, but like, when does it get to the point where it's like we have like autonomous video creative within your brand guidelines and there's like an AI that's making sure that it is within it? And like, it's like that both sides of both like, I guess offense and defense of, just is that like, when does that happen?
Yeah, I think the biggest factor there is actually depends on the business type and their comfort with letting that run. And so I think for like the really large enterprise, that's going to take a little while for it to feel tight enough that, once you hit that level where I've got not only brand guidelines, but I've got like motion graphics in my brand guidelines and like my transitions have to be on, that's going to take a second. But if you're living in a world where it's like, I've got a bunch of assets, I've got a voice, I care a lot about the voice, I care about the overall quality, I care that we like use my assets. But beyond that, like, I'm not too picky about my transitions and that kind of stuff. Next year.
Yeah, because that's
Crazy.
the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is like we had this debate on ADSN a few weeks ago where it was like as uh, as basically like vibe coding makes it easier for marketers to write software, but then also marketing is going to make it easier for developers to own the marketing side of it. It's like who's
Yep.
going to win, like the developer or the marketer? And I do honestly think the developer, even if like even if it gets so easy or so much easier to write code, the people and like the mindset of the types that were writing code previously are going to be very good at this. Like, you know, the
Uh,
like systems architects, thinkers. And so for those types, it's interesting to think how easy it could be. And again, that's so different than enterprise. But like for someone who's like trying to put out these basically viral apps or trying to do like, you know, sort of, you know, drop ship D2C brands, like you could imagine someone who's like very, very technical, pumping that out, tying it to this, and having that feedback into the development cycle. And like, I don't know, have you heard of like, have you heard of any like really, really technical people and engineers wanting to learn more about this stuff? Or do you feel like right now it's still the marketers are talking about the marketing?
That's a great question. I would say it's, at least in our conversations, we've still found that it lives in the marketing function. I think where we really see things headed is ultimately results win. It doesn't really matter whether the marketers and engineers get into a room and fight it out when it comes down to what gets results. And so I think that what we're going to see is that the things that we know drive results, testing and iterating, and having a brand and a story, but then putting that through its paces. So I think whatever powers that is going to be the ultimate decider, and that's probably a combination of marketers giving the campaign concepts and what is our differentiation and all that kind of stuff, but then ultimately is an engine that's just turn on creative optimization.
And do you think for you guys, given you've been focused on video, but you are, I guess, like multi-model, right? Like, will you guys like, I guess, like, do you see it's going to be vertical solutions? I guess in terms of like sure, like you guys are just going to go all in on video, and then like there's going to be an audio version of you, or do you think that you're like sight, sound, and motion, and so who cares? And so like you guys can be all the above, and that's kind of what this looks like.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the latter. We started on video because we think it's the hardest part and the most interesting and just kind of what we love. But we've been basically waiting for the image and audio AI to get good enough to say, hey, you've got a hero video. Let's make some assets that go support it. And we're getting close to that.
And like where are we on the adoption curve? Like you mentioned like the enterprises, dabbling maybe, but are still hesitant. I imagine just like in history, like the upstarts and like the D2C brands or the early stage marketers are much more open to testing, iterating, and like trying this out and seeing how it can make their operations more efficient. But like where truly are you seeing us on like that adoption curve?
Totally. I think we're still extremely early. We're seeing, I think most people have not adopted AI creative in a meaningful way. They've maybe dabbled with it at most, but we're really not seeing many that have like actually implemented. And I think that's in large part because the most famous AI companies and that you kind of think AI images, AI video are the platforms, the foundational models, and they're just not built to make ads. They can make ads, but it's like not really designed for that. And so you get in there and you're like, you have this experience that so many people have had with so many different AI tools, which is like, sounds so cool. I see these people posting this amazing stuff, but I get in there and it's like, why is this not working? And so they kind of give up. And we need those platforms that are purpose built to unlock that.
And so have you guys found, like, you guys obviously work with a ton of brands, big and smaller, like, is there a commonality between the brands that are doing really well with this? Or have you seen examples of specific brands that like, you're like, they're knocking this out of the park?
So we actually almost entirely work with platforms. So we work with the teams that work with the brands. So we don't kind of go direct to brands, but that means that most of the brands don't even know they're getting AI creative. They're just getting creative. And to them, it's just kind of the same that they've always had. And it's like, oh, wow, cool. I can get something way more proactively, quickly, cheaply than I maybe was expecting. But they're not like the brands themselves don't even know they're embracing AI creative. So I think it's been cool to see all these platforms pick it up and find cool ways to do it. But yeah, I think you're right. Is once the brands start to really realize the potential of, oh, I can't, it's not just that I can get one ad, I can get 20 different messages times 5 different 5 different versions, and start to run that. Now I've got something cool. So that's really just starting.
You're a gateway drug to AI creative. Cool, man. Well, before you head out, I guess, like, what do you, just for people who want to dive more into like the space, like what, like, I think models probably in particular, do you think people should look into? Like, is it Kling? Like, what should people dive into, like, figure out, like, just like they want to get smarter? Or is there anyone on like YouTube you follow or that you think people should check out? So I think everyone's super curious, but like most people have no idea what the hell's going on.
Yeah, totally. Great question. Yeah, I think the models that I think are really worth paying attention to, I love Kling is definitely really strong. If you're wanting to go, American made, I would check out, I think Luma on one side and Veo from Google are two really, worthwhile. They follow your instructions. It allows you to kind of get creative, and it understands the physical world pretty well. But they're all changing so dang fast that really just try whatever you feel, and it's pretty interesting. And if you want to go kind of really get to know AI in general, but including AI creative, I'd definitely plug the Cognitive Revolution podcast, which is actually comes from our founder, but he does a really nice job getting very practical and deep on things that actually matter in AI. So that's a good one.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much. And I guess one last thing before we let you go, where can people learn more? We've got your X post or your X handle listed, but where can people check you out?
Yeah, totally. Find me on LinkedIn, come connect, and just go to waymark.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. As things keep moving, we're going to bring you back to hear the latest and greatest. So thanks again, Alex.
Sweet. Fun as always. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
From the break of dawn to late night and get the truth straight from ADSN.